The Staten Island Railway is the only rapid transit line in the New York City borough of Staten Island, legally called the Staten Island Rapid Transit Operating Authority, a unit of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. It is considered a standard railroad line, but only freight service which runs along the western portion of the North Shore branch is connected to the National Railway System. SIR operates 24/7 with modified R44 New York City Subway cars, and is run by the New York City Transit Authority, an agency of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority and operator of the New York City Subway. However, there is no direct rail link between the SIR and the subway system proper, so riders to get a free transfer to New York City subway lines, and the line is included on official New York City subway maps. Commuters who use the railway typically use the Staten Island Ferry to reach Manhattan. The line is accessible from within the ferry terminal, and most of its trains connect with the ferry. The Staten Island Railway provides full-time local service between St. George and Tottenville along the east side of the borough. There is currently no subway service offered for those residents living on the western and northern sides of the borough, but Staten Island Light Rail has been proposed for these corridors, though not endorsed by the MTA. The line has a route bullet similar to other subway routes, the letters SIR in a blue circle. It is used only on timetables and on the MTA's site, not on trains. The line runs 24 hours a day every day of the year and is one of only 6 mass transit rail lines in the United States to do so. On weekdays, express service to St. George is provided between 6:15 a.m. and 8:15 a.m. and to Tottenville from 7:01 a.m. to 8:01 a.m. and 4:01 p.m. to 7:51 p.m. Morning express trains run non-stop between St. George and New Dorp. Afternoon express trains run non-stop from St. George to Great Gills southbound only. Express service is noted on trains by the presence of a red marker with the terminal and express directly underneath it. History: 19th century. The Staten Island Railway was incorporated on August 2, 1851, after Perth Amboy and Staten Island residents petitioned for a Tottenville to Stapleton rail line. The railroad was financed through a loan from Cornelius Commodore Vanderbilt, the sole Staten Island to Manhattan ferry operator on the East Shore, which was his first involvement in a railroad. The line was completed to Tottenville on June 2, 1860. Many stations were named after nearby large farms, such as Garrettson's or Gifford's. There were more elaborate structures put in place at Eltingville and Annandale as the namesakes. The Eltings and Anna of Seguin were influential in financing the construction of the Staten Island Railway. Under the leadership of Commodore Vanderbilt's brother Jacob H. Vanderbilt, the Staten Island Railroad took over several independent ferries, and train service was increased. The Staten Island Railway and ferry line were making a modest profit until the explosion of the ferry ship Westfield at Whitehall Street Terminal, on July 30, 1871. By July 1872, the railroad and the ferry were in receivership. On September 7, 1872, the property of the company was sold to George Law and Horace Thiel. Erastus Wiman, dubbed the Duke of Staten Island, became one of the most prominent residents of Staten Island after locating his residence in a mansion on the island. Because the Staten Island Railroad Company was barely operational by the late 1870s, New York State sued to have the company dissolved in May 1880. Wiman organized the Staten Island Rapid Transit Company on March 25, 1880. and partnered with the Baltimore and Amp, Ohio Railroad to build a large rail terminal on the island and centralize the 6 to 8 ferry landings. At one point, Wyman secured an extension on a land purchase option from George Law by naming the place St. George, in order to flatter him. Construction on the Vanderbilt's Landing to Tompkinsville portion of the North Shore branch began on March 17, 1884, and the line opened for passenger service on August 1, 1884. The lighthouse department just above Tompkinsville impeded the line's extension to St. George, but after the SIRT lobbied for an act of Congress, construction of a two-tracked, 580-foot tunnel under the lighthouse began in 1885, for about $190,000. The SIR was leased to the B&Amp for 99 years in 1885. The proceeds of the sale were used to complete the terminal facilities at St. George, pay for 2 miles of waterfront property, complete the rapid transit railroad, build the bridge over the Kilvancull at Elizabethport, and build other terminal facilities. The North Shore branch opened for service on February 23, 1886, up to Elm Park. The St. George Terminal opened on March 7, 1886, and all SIR lines were extended to this station. On March 8, 1886, the South Beach branch opened for passenger service to Arica. The remainder of the North Shore branch to its terminus at Arastana was opened in the summer of 1886. The new lines opened by the B&Amp Railroad were called the Staten Island Rapid Transit Railway, while the original line from Clifton to Tottenville was called the Staten Island Railway. Various proposals were made by the B&Amp for a railroad between Staten Island and New Jersey. The accepted proposal consisted of a 5 1/4 line from the Arthur Kill to meet the Jersey Central at Cranford, through Union County and the communities of Roselle Park and Linden. Construction on this road started in 1889, and the line was finished in the latter part of that year. Congress passed a law on June 16, 1886 authorizing the construction of a 500-foot swing bridge over the Arthur Kill. After 3 years of effort by Erastu Wyman, the start of construction was delayed for 9 months by the need for approval of the Secretary of War, and another 6 months due to an injunction from the state of New Jersey. This required construction to continue through the brutal winter of 1888 because Congress had set a completion deadline of June 16, 1888, 2 years after signing the bill. The bridge was completed 3 days early on June 13, 1888, at 3 p.m. At the time of its opening, the Arthur Kill Bridge was the largest drawbridge ever constructed in the world. There were no fatalities in the construction of the bridge. On January 1, 1890, the first train operated from St. George Terminal to Cranford Junction. Once the Arthur Kill Bridge was completed, pressure was brought upon the United States War Department by the Lehigh Valley Railroad and the Pennsylvania Railroad to have the newly built bridge torn down and replaced with a bridge with a different design, claiming that it was an obstruction for the navigation of the large numbers of coal barges past Holland Hook on the Arthur Kill. They were, however, not successful in these efforts. In 1889, the South Beach branch was extended from Arica to a new terminal at South Beach. In 1889, the Southfield Beach Electric Railway, a non-Staten Island rapid transit service, was built for 1 mile from the SIRT's South Beach to Midland Beach, which during this time was a popular resort, with hotels and a gambling casino. In 1897, the terminal at St. George, which served the railroad and the ferry to Manhattan, was completed. 20th-century improvements were made to the SIRT after the Pennsylvania Railroad took control of the B&Amp in 1900. After PRI control, the B&O was profitable again and became a stronger railroad. On October 25, 1905, the city took ownership of the ferry and terminals, and ejected the B&O from Whitehall Street Terminal. A new St. George Terminal was then built by the city for $2,318,720, in anticipation of a tunnel under the Narrows to Brooklyn and a connection with the New York subway system at the Bay Ridge 95th Street station. The SIRT electrified its lines using third rail power distribution and cars similar to those of the Brooklyn Manhattan Transit Corporation. The first electric train was operated on the South Beach branch between South Beach and Fort Wadsworth on May 30, 1925, and the other branches were electrified by November 1925. The electrification brought no big increase in traffic, and the tunnel was never built. In the 1920s, a branch along the west shore of Staten Island was built to haul materials to construct the outer bridge crossing. The branch was cut back to a point south of the bridge after the bridge was built. The Gulf Oil Corporation opened a dock and tank farm along the Arthur Kill in 1928, and in order to serve it, the Travis branch was built south from Arlington Yard into the marshes of the island's western shore to Gulfport. On February 25, 1937, the Port Richmond Tower Hill Viaduct was completed, becoming the largest grade crossing elimination project in the United States. The viaduct was more than a mile long, and spanned 8 grade crossings on the North Shore branch of the SIRT. The opening of the viaduct marked the final part of a $6 million grade crossing elimination project on Staten Island, which eliminated 34 grade crossings on the north and south shores of Staten Island. Staten Island Borough President Joseph A. Palmer proposed in 1936 to extend the Staten Island Rapid Transit to Manhattan across the Bayonne Bridge. The Port of New York Authority endorsed the same plan in 1937, with a terminal at 51st Street in Manhattan near Rockefeller Center to serve the trains of Erie, West Shore, Lackawanna, Jersey Central, and trains from Staten Island. This original proposal would be brought back in 1950 by Edward Corsi, a Republican candidate for mayor. In the 1940s, freight and World War II traffic helped pay off some of the debt the SIRT had accumulated, and briefly made the SIRT profitable. During the Second World War, all of the East Coast military hospital trains were handled by the SIRT, with some trains stopping at Arlington on Staten Island to transfer wounded soldiers to a large military hospital. The need to transport war material, powertrains, and troops made the stretch of the Baltimore and Amp, New York Railway between Cranford Junction and the Arthur Kill extremely busy. The B&O also operated special trains for important officials such as Winston Churchill. On June 25, 1946, a fire wrecked the terminal at St. George, killing 3 people and causing damage worth $22 million. The fire destroyed the ferry terminal and the 4 slips used for Manhattan service, the terminal for Staten Island Rapid Transit trains. The replacement terminal would be opened in 1948. The number of passengers decreased from 12.3 million passengers in 1947 to 4.4 million in 1949, due to passengers switching from SIRT to city-operated buses due to a bus fare cut. On September 5, 1948, 237 of the previous 492 weekday trains were cut. The express service would be reduced during rush hours, and all night trains after 1:29 a.m. would be cancelled. 30% of the company's personnel were laid off. On September 7, 1948, Borough President Hall of Richmond continued to rally against the cuts made by the SIRT at a Public Service Commission hearing in Manhattan. Commuters testified that trains were missing connections to ferry boats and that some trains were being held at the St. George terminal in the rush hour to wait for 2 boatloads of passengers. Previously, they said, the trains pulled out with only 1 boatload of passengers. On September 13, 1948, the SIRT agreed to add 4 trains, and to extend the schedule of 4 others. On September 22, 1948, the Interstate Commerce Commission allowed the SIRT to abandon the ferry it had operated for 88 years between Tottenville and Perth Amboy, New Jersey. The ferry operation was transferred to Sunrise Ferries, Inc. of Elizabeth, New Jersey on October 16. On June 8, 1951, a modern replacement terminal for St. George opened, although portions of the terminal were phased into service at earlier dates. The SIRT discontinued passenger service on the North Shore branch to Arlington and the South Beach branch to Wentworth Avenue at midnight on March 31, 1953 because of city-operated bus competition. The South Beach branch was abandoned shortly thereafter, while the North Shore branch continued to carry freight. By 1955, the third rail on both of the lines were removed. On September 7, 1954, SIRT made an application to discontinue all passenger service on the Tottenville branch on October 7, 1954. A large city subsidy allowed passenger service on the Tottenville branch to continue. In November 1957, the Arthur Kill Swing Bridge was damaged by an Esso oil tanker, and was replaced by a state-of-the-art, single-track, 558-foot vertical lift bridge in 1959. The 2,000-ton lift span was prefabricated, then floated into place. The new bridge was raised 135 feet, and since the new bridge aided navigation on the Arthur Kill, the United States government assumed 90% of the $11 million cost of the project. Freight trains started crossing the bridge when it opened on August 25, 1959. In 1958, the Travis branch was extended to serve a new consolidated Edison power plant in Travis, along Staten Island's west shore, allowing long-unit coal trains from West Virginia to serve the plant. The B&O continued to invest in its properties in New Jersey and Staten Island into the late 1950s. The SIRT continued to lose money even as they rebuilt stations between Jefferson Avenue and New Dorp almost into the 1970s. Rail traffic via the Arthur Kill Bridge dropped dramatically with the closing of Bethlehem Steel in 1960, and of U.S. Gypsum in 1972. On July 1, 1971, operation of the Tottenville line was turned over to the Staten Island Rapid Transit Operating Authority, a division of the state's Metropolitan Transportation Authority, and the line itself was purchased by the City of New York. As part of the agreement, freight along the line was to be continued to be handled by the B&O. On February 28, 1973, the first 6 new R44 cars, the same as the newest cars then in use on the subway lines in the other boroughs, were put into service on the Staten Island Rapid Transit, replacing the PS standard rolling stock that had been inherited from the B&O and had remained in continuous service since 1925. The B&O became part of the larger C&O system through a merger with the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway. The freight operation on the island was renamed the Staten Island Railroad Corporation in 1971. The B&O and C&O became isolated from their other properties in New Jersey and Staten Island. with the creation of Conrail on April 1, 1976, by merger of bankrupt lines in the northeast United States. As a result, the freight service was truncated to Philadelphia. However, for several years afterward, one B&O freight train a day ran to Cranford Junction, with B&O locomotives running through as well. By the year 1973, the Jersey Central's car float yard at Jersey Central was closed. Afterwards, the car float operation of the B&O was brought back to Staten Island at St. George Yard. This car float operation was taken over by the New York Dock Railway in September 1979, and was ended the following year. Only a few isolated industries on Staten Island were using rail service for freight, meaning that the yard at St. George was essentially abandoned. The C&O system was forced to sell the Staten Island Railroad to the New York, Susquehanna and Amp Western Railroad, which was owned by the Delaware Otsego Corporation in April 1985. Due to a lack of business, the Susquehanna then embargoed the track east of Elm Park on the North Shore branch, ending rail freight traffic to St. George. In 1990, Procter & Gamble, the line's largest customer, closed, leading to a large drop in freight traffic. The last freight train over the bridge came in 1990, and the operation ended on July 25, 1991, when the Arthur Kill Bridge was taken out of service. Afterwards, the North Shore branch and the Arthur Kill Bridge were taken over by CSX. The line as well as the bridge were purchased again in 1994, this time by the New York City Economic Development Corporation, whose purchase was followed by a decade of false starts. In 1994, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority reinstituted the line's original name. The passenger portion of the line is called MTA Staten Island Railway.